You care too much about what people think, and it is shaping your life in ways you barely notice. Not in obvious ways, but in small, constant adjustments. You hesitate before speaking. You soften your opinions. You change your behavior depending on who you are around. And over time, those small adjustments begin to add up. You are no longer acting freely, you are acting carefully. Carefully managing how you are seen, how you are judged, how you might be perceived. Most people never question this because it feels normal. They call it being socially aware. They call it reading the room. They call it being careful. But underneath all of that is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of not being accepted. And this fear is quietly controlling your decisions. You do not say what you really think. You do not act how you really feel. You filter yourself before anyone else has a chance to. And slowly, you begin to lose yourself. Not all at once, but piece by piece, because every time you choose approval over authenticity, you move further away from who you actually are. And the worst part is, you do not even realize it is happening because it feels like you are making your own choices. But you are not. You are reacting. Reacting to what you think people will think. And that is where the real problem begins. Because you are not responding to reality. You are responding to your imagination. You are adjusting your behavior based on thoughts that do not even exist. Think about that. You are living your life based on imagined judgments. And those imagined judgments are controlling your actions. That is not awareness. That is a prison. The Stoics understood this. They knew that the opinions of others are not just outside your control. They are unstable, unreliable, and often completely wrong. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this constantly. He understood that people will think what they want to think. No matter what you do, you could act perfectly and still be misunderstood. You could say everything right and still be judged, because people do not see you clearly. They see you through themselves, through their own beliefs, their own insecurities, their own experiences, which means their opinion of you is not truly about you. And once you understand that, something begins to shift, because their judgment loses weight. It stops feeling like truth and starts feeling like perspective. And perspective is not fixed. It changes from person to person, which means you cannot build your life around it, because there is nothing stable to build on. Yet most people try to. They try to shape themselves into something that will be accepted. They adjust constantly, trying to avoid criticism, trying to avoid rejection, trying to be liked. But there is a problem with this. You will be judged no matter what you do. There is no version of you that escapes it. If you speak confidently, someone will call you arrogant. If you stay quiet, someone will call you weak. If you succeed, someone will envy you. If you fail, someone will criticize you. You cannot win. And once you realize that, you stop trying to. You stop trying to control something that was never yours to control. And that is where freedom begins. Not when people stop judging you, but when you stop needing their approval. Because approval is addictive. It feels good when you receive it, but it comes at a cost. The cost of authenticity, the cost of self-trust, the cost of your own direction. And over time, that cost becomes too high because you begin to depend on it. You begin to measure yourself through other people's reactions. Their approval makes you feel enough. Their disapproval makes you doubt yourself. And that is a fragile way to live, because it places your confidence in something you cannot control, which means it will never be stable. One moment you feel good. The next moment you feel uncertain. Not because you changed, but because their opinion did. That is not confidence. That is dependence. Real confidence comes from something else. It comes from internal standards, from knowing who you are, from acting in alignment with your values, not in alignment with other people's expectations, because expectations change, but values remain. And when you begin to live according to your values, something powerful happens. You stop performing, you stop adjusting, you stop filtering every action through the lens of approval, and you begin to act with clarity, not because you are certain, but because you are aligned. And alignment creates stability, which creates confidence. And that confidence does not need validation. It does not rise and fall based on opinions. It remains steady because it is yours. And here is the irony. When you stop trying to be liked, you become more respected because authenticity is rare. Most people are still performing, still adjusting, still holding back. But when you do not, you stand out, not because you are trying to, but because you are not pretending. And people notice that, not consciously, but instinctively, because authenticity feels different. It feels real, and anything real is powerful. But that is not the goal. The goal is freedom. Freedom from constantly overthinking what people think of you. Freedom from second-guessing every decision. Freedom from adjusting yourself to fit expectations. Because that is not living. That is performing, and most people spend their entire lives performing, changing who they are depending on the situation. Never fully themselves, always slightly edited. But you do not have to live like that. You can choose differently. You can choose to act based on your values, to speak honestly, to move without constantly seeking approval. And yes, some people will not like it, but they were never going to like you anyway. And the people who matter will respect you for it, because authenticity attracts the right people and filters out the wrong ones. So instead of trying to be accepted by everyone, focus on being true to yourself, because that is where real confidence comes from, and that is where real freedom begins. Mastering your emotions does not remove the challenges of life. You will still be judged. You will still face criticism, but it transforms how you respond to it. And that transformation changes everything. There is something else that happens when you begin to detach from other people's opinions. You begin to see how much of your life was never truly yours. The way you speak, the way you act, the way you present yourself, so much of it has been shaped by what you thought would be accepted. Not by what is true, not by what is real, but by what is safe. And safety is often the enemy of authenticity, because the safest version of you is rarely the most honest one. It is the most controlled, the most filtered, the most edited, and that version of you might be accepted, but it will never feel complete, because deep down, you know it is not fully you. This is why so many people feel disconnected, not from others, but from themselves, because they have spent so long adjusting that they no longer know what it feels like to be natural. Everything feels calculated, everything feels observed, and that creates tension, a constant low-level pressure, the pressure to maintain an image, the pressure to be consistent with how others see you, the pressure to not break character. But that pressure disappears the moment you stop trying to control perception, because there is nothing left to maintain. You are no longer managing an image. You are simply being, and that creates a kind of freedom that most people have never experienced. Not loud freedom, not dramatic freedom, quiet freedom, the kind that shows up in small moments. Speaking without hesitation, acting without second-guessing, existing without constantly analyzing yourself. And once you feel that, you realize how heavy the old way of living actually was. There is also something else that becomes clear. Most people are doing the same thing. They are also filtering themselves. They are also adjusting. They are also trying to be accepted, which means the judgment you fear is often coming from people who are just as unsure as you are, just as self-conscious, just as concerned about how they are being perceived. And when you realize that, the weight of their opinion begins to shrink, because you stop seeing them as judges and start seeing them as equals, people navigating the same internal struggles, people trying to figure themselves out, people trying to be accepted, just like you. This shift changes how you interact with others. You stop placing them above you. You stop seeking their approval. You stop fearing their judgment, and instead, you begin relating to them on equal ground, without pressure, without performance. And that creates better connections, more real connections, because there is no longer a barrier, no image to maintain, no role to play, just honesty. And honesty builds trust. But there is another important truth you need to understand. Letting go of other people's opinions does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean ignoring feedback. It does not mean rejecting all external input. It means choosing what matters. Because not all opinions are equal. Some are noise, some are projection, Some are based on misunderstanding, but some are valuable. Some come from people who understand you, people who have experience, people who want to see you improve. The difference is, you decide which opinions to listen to. Not your fear, not your insecurity, you. And that changes everything, because now you are no longer reacting automatically. You are choosing deliberately. You are deciding what deserves your attention and what does not. This is control, not control over others. Control over yourself, control over what influences you, control over how you respond. And this kind of control creates stability, because your emotional state is no longer dependent on random opinions. It is grounded in your own standards, your own thinking, your own direction. There is also something deeper happening beneath all of this. When you stop caring so much about what people think, you begin to trust yourself more, because you are no longer outsourcing your decisions. You are no longer looking outward for validation. You are looking inward for direction. And every time you do that, you reinforce something: self-trust. And self-trust is one of the most important qualities you can develop, because it removes hesitation, it removes doubt, it removes the need to constantly seek reassurance. You begin to move with certainty, not because you know everything, but because you trust your ability to handle what comes next. And that is where real confidence comes from. Not from approval, not from praise, but from knowing you can rely on yourself. There is also a point where something shifts permanently, where you stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "Does this align with who I want to be?" And that question simplifies everything, because it removes unnecessary complexity. It removes conflicting opinions. It removes external pressure, and it replaces it with clarity. Clarity based on your values, your standards, your direction. And once you start living like that, your life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer, because you are no longer pulled in different directions. You are moving forward consistently, without constantly adjusting your path, without constantly questioning yourself. And that consistency builds momentum, because you are no longer stopping to evaluate every step. You are moving, and movement creates progress, not perfection. Progress. And progress builds confidence, which reduces the need to seek approval, which further increases your independence. And the cycle begins to reverse. Instead of being controlled by external opinions, you become guided by internal clarity. And that is the shift. That is the breakthrough. Not when people stop judging you, but when their judgment stops mattering, because your direction is no longer dependent on them. It is defined by you. And that is where real power begins. If you are working to strengthen your mind and stop being controlled by other people's opinions, consider subscribing to the Mind Refine. Because in a world where most people are controlled by what others think, the one who frees themselves becomes powerful.